On this episode of the Building the Future podcast, I reconnect with Levi Smith of Franklin Building Supply. If you want to find out more about Levi and his background, go check out episode number 50. But today, Levi and we discuss a SWOT analysis. But this SWOT analysis is a little bit different because we are discussing the strength and weaknesses of technology, and more importantly, how it's utilized in the business and how the individual users can maximize their productivity by efficiently and effectively using technology. As together, we are building the future. This is the Building the Future podcast. I am your host, the lumberjack, Brett Thorne. On this show, we explore topics including construction, building materials, real estate, remodeling, the housing market, industry news, new products and trends, technology, government, everything you need for building the future. But, I think our industry has really come a long way. Of course, our hand was forced a little bit with the pandemic, but we've really adapted well to technology. But I think we still got a ways to go.
Well, I am a technologist in my own right. I've been programming since I was a wee child, and push what I call. I think there's a lot of sort of push to almost use kind of dumb technology where it's just there. It's hardware, software. So it seems like we've got to use it. And I'm really interested in, the technology that's a difference maker. But even with that background, you still run into issues like we did today where you're just battling against the operating system and a browser and hardware that just don't really want to talk to one another. And, that same problem's existed for 30 years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Jennifer had told me, she said that that was one of the recommendations from hers to connect with you because you are using a lot of technology. So what have you found the most beneficial? And I think this is great. I definitely want to pick your brain on a lot of stuff. I already told you I'm jealous about Idaho. We want to talk about that, but and I'm kind of looking at your background. I was looking at you on LinkedIn, and you're one of the elusive ones that comes into our industry not from from another background, a professional background.
Yeah. I could hit on a couple of those things there, but I think when I came to Franklin Building Supply in January of 2016, we looked like a lot of LBMs across the country where there's some software and some technology. There's also a lot of fax machines and tons of paper and the way that I kind of describe our state in 2016, and there's still a lot of companies in our industry in this spot right now, is they have systems that are essentially digital filing cabinets. When you think about the 80s and 90s era of software, certainly you had the spreadsheets and word processors and other things coming to the table and some of the most basic databases. But what most businesses implemented was a digital version of a filing cabinet. And outside of the fact that it's digital, it basically works just like a filing cabinet. There's tons of stuff in there. It's not that easy to find what you're looking for. And it's not something that you can really leverage to make something better for either employees, customers, or your suppliers. It's just a digital filing cabinet, just like a paper filing cabinet. And again, comes with many of the same sort of challenges and constraints and issues. And so, we've gone through a process over the last 5 years now of really modernizing the business. And our goal is actually, to be on the forefront of how we leverage technology in smart ways. Again, technology for technology's sake, I think, is a waste of time. But if there's a clear opportunity to leverage it for the benefit of our employees, our customers, our suppliers, we're interested. So, we transitioned ERP systems, we got rid of the fax machines, we moved to, true HRIS system. We've implemented analytics platforms, completely changed our back end, our communication tools. And, what I told the team in 2016 was, in a short period of time, we will flip from having very little information that we can get our hands on in this digital filing cabinet to having way more information than we ever imagined. And the trick when you flip is, how are you actually going to use that? And email is the easiest example. Everybody can relate to having too much email, right? So email allows you to communicate with a lot more people a lot more frequently. But that in and of itself creates this volume problem. And now you're wondering, well, what email do I need to be attentive to? What email actually matters? You never had that problem when people are sending you letters, because they couldn't sort of, maintain a pace or a scale that overwhelmed the recipient. And in a similar way, other enterprise software tools, when you modernize those, they create way more information that's way more accessible than ever before. And the trick becomes, well, what are we going to do with this? Because to me, that's really what's helpful about technology, is it should be what I call a force multiplier. It's no different than handing an infantryman, a machine gun versus a musket. The task remains the same, but there's a reason that an M16 in a military context is a force multiplier. So it takes one soldier and it, turns them into a different type of fighter than a soldier with a musket. And technology at its core is really the same thing. So I'm always asking my team, what's the force multiplying effect here? How are we going to leverage this? I don't care that we're going to have more information than ever before and it's more accessible. What is our team actually going to do with it? And so I think that's the biggest challenge today in a lot of businesses, and certainly our industry, is one, making that flip from a digital filing cabinet to, software and technology that actually acts as a force multiplier. And then when you do make that flip, you've got to figure out, how does our team actually use this? Because if you hand a soldier an M16 and he doesn't know how to use it, well, he's not any better than when he had the musket or a bayonet. So, how do you actually use the software? How do you use the technology? Because otherwise, it's just something that looks pretty, and you can, tell your friends you've modernized your business, but
Yeah.
to no real end.
Well, and even like you talked about, even with the data, I mean, yeah, it's great to have the data, but if you're not using the data for improvement in some form or fashion, whether to grow sales, whether to better maintain or to improve margins or to lower expenses, if you're not using those data points, the data does you no good. You can have all the data in the world,
Right.
but if you're not actually applying the data, saying, okay, where are we at? Where do we need to be? Okay, here's where we're at. Here's the data shows, okay, what do we need to be? Either using your own targets and goals, or looking at benchmarks from different associations, saying, okay, well, everybody else is here, or the high performers are here. Okay, we're well behind now that we have the data. But if you're not actually using the information, it's worthless.
Right. And one of the things that we use as kind of a litmus test is, and I challenge our team to really think about using technology to help our team focus on uniquely human tasks. So it turns out, and hopefully this isn't any great offense to anybody, right? But that technology software is better at math. At its core, it's about ones and zeros, and it's better at math, more accurate, can crunch more numbers, and it's better at certain tasks than people are. If it's designed correctly, it's better remembering that this thing needs to be done next, or on this date, send that. So what we try to do is say, hey, let's leverage technology to maximize the time and energy that people have to focus on uniquely human tasks. Software is really bad at negotiating with a customer. It's really bad at collections. It's really bad at finding and interviewing and onboarding your next great hire. There are all these things that are uniquely human tasks where people add the most value. And so what I tell our team is, we're leveraging and implementing these tools for a very particular end. We're leveraging and implementing these tools so that software and the technology, the hardware, can do what it's really good at and free you up from those tasks, because it's better at those than we are as people. I want to maximize your time on, let's take a sales counter person for an example. I would prefer for a sales counter person to have more time to actually interact with people coming into the store, helping to solve whatever problem they have and to understand what they need to execute a particular project that they're trying to do, whether that's a do-it-yourselfer or that's one of our tradespeople coming in or a builder. I want them to be able to have all the time in the world to have that interaction and to provide a lot of value in that interaction and problem solving, sort of exercise with them. I don't want them to have to spend a lot of time on actually processing the transaction, remembering to notify the customer that this material on a special order came in, or that this is getting delivered today, or that whatever it is that they're needing to at a transactional level communicate with the customer about. And so you can think about that, of course, in all kinds of areas: finance, inventory, AR, AP, all kinds of stuff. You want the software and technology doing the stuff it's good at, and what it's best at is math, dates, time. So maximize it as much as possible in those areas. And instead of that being a threat to employees, it should be seen as an opportunity for those employees to actually do the things that they're best at, and it turns out are much more enjoyable and are much more satisfying and much more worthwhile. Nobody does mundane work that they know a computer could do better, right? These kind of mundane tasks were like, why hasn't somebody solved this problem? Nobody's doing that thinking, this feels really good. I'm glad I get to spend my time doing this. And so, that there's where we try to leverage technology so that, our people can, again, spend as much time as possible really interacting with humans, problem solving, being innovative, being creative, doing the things again that the software and hardware is not only bad at today, but I think will be bad at forever.
Yeah. And it's funny you talk about that because, I've taken a look at my professional life over the last few years, and I've kind of shifted the way I think and trying to do what I do. And I'd always look at, not a full SWOT analysis, but especially on the strength and weakness side. I'm like, okay, I would try to take those weaknesses and I would try to improve those. Like, how do I get better at those? How do I make those? How do I up the level of my performance on those things? Where more recently, and within the last couple of years, I've kind of really reevaluated my position on that and said, you know what, I shouldn't be doing that. I should be focused on my strengths, my 3 to 5 things that I am phenomenal at, and then all the other things that are not strong suits for me, I need to be offloading those. I need to find somebody that can accommodate me, somebody on the team that is good at those kinds of things, and let them handle it because I can get so much more done. I can be so much more productive. My final output is so much greater when I focus on the things that I am strong in and that I am good at versus trying to bring my weaknesses up to not even par, because obviously that is not something that I am innate abilities to do well, and let alone to try to be a top performer at it. I am going to be spending so much time trying to develop that where that time can be so much more productive focusing
Right.
on. And I've been trying to do that with my people too, looking at them saying, okay, what are they good at? And that kind of goes back to the concept of, having the right people on the bus, but then also having them in the right position or the right seat on the bus to make sure that you are maximizing those strengths and then trying to remove as many of the weaknesses as you can.
Yeah, yeah. The only thing I would add to that, I generally agree with you. The only thing I would add is I think you have to balance that with looking ahead and anticipating what may need to be a strength for you in the future. So, if there's a strength that you will need, let's say for a future role or future situation, and that may be a weakness now, I think that's an area where you do invest, even though the return on that time isn't going to be particularly high right now. So, that's the only thing I would add from my perspective to what you shared there, where absolutely you're focusing on your strengths and you're maximizing those. And I was kind of talking about doing that
Mhm.
across an entire
Well,
organization
yeah.
with how we leverage technology. But then really supplementing that with whether you're again talking about the organization or talking about an individual with an exercise where they're really thinking through, again, whether you're an organization or a person, thinking through, well, what will need to be a strength in the future. And so then you need to exercise discipline today to really work on that weakness. So let's say that you've got somebody that is a really weak note taker. They don't take very good notes after an interaction with a customer or a prospect. They kind of forget the details that are oftentimes the difference makers in a relationship, especially in the early days with the customer or prospect. And that's not a strength of theirs. Well, obviously, for them to continue to grow in the organization and take on more and more responsibility, that weakness needs to become a strength because it will be a limiter, even though they're not, naturally good at taking notes. And I pick on notes because I think actually that's one where I'm always surprised at how many people think, you know what, I don't need to write anything down. I'm gonna remember this. How many people I sit in, meetings with and have no pen and paper, in hand. They have nothing to sort of catalog. And a few thoughts are running through my mind. I mean, I'm wondering, are you having so few of these interactions with me as a business leader or with a customer prospect that you've only got 3 or 4 interactions in an entire week to remember? That in itself might be a problem. Or are you unaware of what's falling through the cracks? Are you unaware of what this is communicating to someone sitting across from you, that you're not bringing a level of attention or whatever? So that could be a weakness for somebody. And again, if they're really junior, hey, this is going to be a big issue as you take on more and more responsibility later, whether you're talking about sales operations or whatever. And so work on that. So that's the only kind of supplement I give to folks where I'm generally saying the same thing. Hey, let's focus on what you're really good at. Let's get you in your sweet spot, and let's have you excelling there.
Sure, get you in your groove and let you stride.
Right.
It's funny you talk about notes, and it just made me think about took me down a trip down memory lane. So when I was in school, I spent a lot of time in the service industry. I mean, that was one of those industries for young people while in school and stuff that you could make some money. Always had cash in your pocket. Restaurants and bars always needed help. And in the restaurants I worked in, I remembered, one of the things, and I was just trying to rationalize it in my head just now as we were kind of talking about that. I would never write down people's orders. I could just remember it, and it wasn't even so much remembering it. I think it was the fact that it was just a menu, and it wasn't that complex. It was very easy to obviously kind of remember what people wanted, but it's not like there was a lot to it. So I just never wrote it down. I never had to. And very, very rare did I ever screw anything up. And people would be amazed. Customers would be amazed, especially you get a group of, 8, 10, 12 people. And I can remember everybody's order, even all the side dishes. And now granted, I mean, I worked at it was like, your Cheddar's and your TGI Fridays and some of your chain restaurants. It wasn't big, elaborate restaurants with, at 5-course meals or anything like that. Simplicity, at small men, wouldn't not say small menus, but pretty common menus. So it was just easy for me to remember those things. But now I literally, I've got paper, just your regular 8.5 by 11 paper. I've always got a piece that's folded 4 times in my pocket, and I'm constantly writing notes. I can pull one out now, and you'll just see a whole string of notes, and I've flipped it and I've turned it inside out, and things I need to do tomorrow, things I need to do next week, things that I don't want to forget, and just use it as a notepad. I've always got it with me. I've got to use notes in my phone.
Right.
I keep notes, but my life is a lot more complex now. My work is a lot more complex. The complexity of life now requires me to be a lot more organized, where then I was in school and I didn't have a lot going on. I mean, I had classes I had and all that stuff, but as far as the work was simple. It was easy. I mean, it was just food. And it was easy to remember what their main dish was and the side dish was and what they were drinking. That was pretty simple.
The complexity sort of sort of point I think is well taken, right? But the opportunity, and I think it's part of the point you're making. I mean, even when you can get away without being attentive to some things that might be a weakness, again, if you can anticipate that they will need to be a strength down the road, I think there's an opportunity today to start preparing, start building
Oh yeah.
the habits. So I don't think people, I subscribe to sort of theory. I don't think people rise to the occasion. They fall to their minimum level of preparation. And so I think that it's really critical to start preparing today for what you anticipate you may need to do in the future. And that's in your personal life or professional life. When I'm talking with, some folks in their late teens that, aspire to have a family down the road, and you're doing some mentoring with them, one of the questions, I ask them is, are you spending any time learning about what it means to be a good father or be a good mother or to be a good husband or a good wife? And I'll tell you, without spoiling the surprise, the answer is always no. Like, why in the world would I need to think about that? That's, further down the road. And one of the things I tell them is your future spouse, your future children will suffer the consequences of your lack of preparation today. It's not that you can't recover, but you have an opportunity right now while life is simpler to just
Mhm.
start to prepare. You're not going to take a master class. There are lots of things, marriage and family are in this bucket where there's so many things that you can't learn without actually experiencing it. And so there's no substitute for that. But there are a lot of things that you can learn. And so start preparing today for what you anticipate life may bring, whether personally and professionally, over the next 3, 5, possibly 10 years. It gets really hard to sort of anticipate, further out than that. But I think you can look at life and you can say, okay, here's what I'm going for. Here's what I can imagine happening, and start preparing today. And if that's a weakness you need to shore up, or that's just some a knowledge gap you need to cover, or other experiences you want to expose yourself to. So you hear some stories of people that felt like they did it well and people that felt like they did it very poorly and would have done it very differently if they had another chance at it. There's so many opportunities to learn, whether we're learning through a podcast or book or audio book or video series, or the opportunities today to learn are so plentiful. And I think I find myself a little befuddled sometimes when folks don't, take some advantage of that, and have a little bit more aggressive posture, because I think again it has good ripple effects both professionally and personally, to try to anticipate what those needs are, and to do something. Again, you're not going to be able to do everything, but to do something today to prepare for what you think you may face down the road. And I think you'll be better prepared for it, and it's more likely to go well either for you or the other people involved.
Wasn't Abraham Lincoln that said if he had 6 hours to chop down a tree, he'd spend the first 4 hours sharpening his axe?
Right. Yeah, the same
That's
principle.
that preparation. You spend the time up front preparing for the task so that you know that you will be best suited to accomplish it. Whatever the task, maybe you don't even know what the tasks are, but preparing yourself so that you have opportunities. The more preparation you've done, the more education, the more knowledgeable you are, the more opportunities you'll have. Even if maybe your initial task or goal is not obtainable, or maybe it isn't even viable at that point, but you know what, you've now got this knowledge, you've got this information that you can apply in other facets of life. So yeah, I mean, and of course, podcasts for me, I mean, obviously you kind of got a sweet spot there. No shock, I mean, I obviously am passionate about them, and the whole how I got into it was simply because I spent so much time traveling between our three locations. I was on the highway all the time, a lot of windshield time. You know what? Radio's fine, talk radio's fine, but it wasn't. I mean, it was yeah, talk radio. I guess you could get a little bit out of it, especially if you're into
Right.
sports and things
It's
like that,
mostly
which is
entertainment.
great. But yeah, but it really wasn't providing me with anything. And I migrated to podcast because I wanted to learn. I wanted to educate myself. And granted, it doesn't all have to be professional. Some of it was hobby. I do a lot of hunting, a lot of outdoor stuff. That's where I first started. Was I was going and looking at hunting podcasts, finding out about different opportunities, different strategies, different things to do. I would educate myself on even things like solar panel. And I know you guys are an employee-owned company. I've
Right.
kind of searched out stuff like that, ESOPs and all that stuff. It's amazing how much information, how much education you can get just because I want to better understand things. I want to be more knowledgeable. I want to know what tomorrow's going to hold, and if that's and I want to be best prepared in any avenue in life. So I think that's a great opportunity. I think so many people don't take advantage of that they
Well,
don't try to improve themselves through self education, whether it be through books, podcasts, whatever.
right. Yeah, so many opportunities. I think what you and I are hitting on is in reality, there's just no excuse for someone not being able to obtain the knowledge or exposure that they're interested in. And I think when I get kind of pushback from somebody, I don't have time. What I really push them on is help me understand how much time each week goes to things that do fit in that entertainment bucket. So whether we're talking about movies, video games, television, listening to sports radio, whatever, all these things fit into an entertainment bucket. And so I just challenge them to take a portion of what they're already allocating to entertainment. They're not taking time away from work or family or any other hobbies. They're just taking time out of their entertainment bucket take a portion of that and dedicate that to learning something new, getting exposed to something that you don't understand. When you talk about the complexity of today, it's not just as you age, things get more complex. We're living in a complex era. Just humanity, as it continues to progress, is generally getting more and more complex, right? People aren't going to stay in the same industry for their entire career these days, certainly compared to a generation or two ago. Technology is changing all the time. Globalization has made the world smaller. Environmental issues, all kinds of things. It's just gotten more complex. More of it's at your front door. And so the more you can do to prepare yourself to just navigate a much more fluid situation in the market and in society, not just for today, but for 5 or 10 years out, the better off you'll be. There are folks that are working in an industry today that in 10 years might not exist anymore. If you want to prepare to be able to navigate and succeed in a different industry or completely different role, you start doing that preparation now. And you may not know exactly what that preparation needs to look like, but maybe it means you need to actually learn a little bit more about what in the world is blockchain and cryptocurrency. It doesn't mean that you're going to own any or you're going to invest or whatever, but it's a big deal, disrupting markets, potentially currency and governments and other things. And so you should be informed about it and just start to understand what's going on. And you could listen to any number of podcasts, just as an example alone, to just begin to expose yourself. So whatever those
I can
areas
recommend a couple because that's one I have educated myself
yeah.
using podcast
So
on
those
that.
opportunities are plentiful. I do have to go back and mention, I know you're a Missouri guy. You may have seen in my background, I went to
I
undergrad
did, yeah, in
in
St.
St.
Louis.
Louis and Washington University there, and had a great time. My 4 years there, fell in love with baseball really for the first time, and
Cardinal baseball,
um,
yeah. They're
fantastic.
passionate about it.
No, it's a great fan base. But when you talk about taking orders without writing them down, my mind immediately goes back to Ted Drew's frozen custard there on Old Route 66. I don't know if you've ever been there in St. Louis. You ever had any Ted Drew's?
I have not. Yeah,
Okay,
I make it to St. Louis occasionally. I'm closer to the Kansas City. I'm on the
sure.
west side of the state,
Yeah,
so
yeah, you're
where
on
the
the west
Kansas City
side of the
base.
state.
Yeah.
But next time you're possibly passing through St. Louis, you're going to have to stop at Ted Drew's frozen custard. So this frozen custard place, and frozen custard is basically a super thick sort of version of ice cream, a French style that has.
Oh, I had Andy's frozen custard
Okay,
yesterday, which is kind of I went to school in Springfield, kind of a big Springfield deal. Now it's
yeah.
moved to Kansas City, so yeah, I get it quite frequently.
Yeah, so big deal on Route 66, kind of I'm not kind of an institution in St. Louis, but the way that Ted Drews ran, and he had two of these stands, but the way that he ran them was they were only staffed by students who made the honor roll in high school, and so that's who he'd hire. And one of their primary rules was they couldn't write anything down. And so every order, and it didn't matter what it was, how big the group was, when people were mixing flavors and different add-ins and all this type of stuff, this high school student would, be behind the counter, and they had to take in this order without writing anything down. And then they would turn around and yell out that order to someone that was actually working one of the machines, and that person needed to remember the order. And then they would, come back and bring that to you. And anyway, so I have a lot of fond memories of being with friends over at Ted Drew's, enjoying some frozen custard, compliments of honor roll student that didn't write anything down and got it right.
That's fantastic, and what a way to really increase people's memory ability, communication ability, and be able to filter in a lot of stuff and make
Listening
sure
skills.
to mentally organize things.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. And I want to be respectful of your time, Levi. I know you got stuff to do. Um, uh, the ironic thing here, and this is not necessarily on our conversation, but more on the physical being. Um, and I'll make a small assumption here. You're sitting there in Boise, Idaho, and that picture right behind you looks like Busch Stadium from St. Louis,
It
Missouri.
is.
Am I
It's
right?
in St. Louis.
Okay. So I'm sitting here in Missouri, and that picture right there, that's the Salmon River out of Stanley, Idaho.
There you
In
go.
Missouri, Idaho's behind me. You're in Idaho, Missouri's behind you. You got to love the irony of that.
Oh, that's fantastic. No, when I fell in love with baseball, and we'll have to go for this, and we can continue a conversation at another time. I'd love to, but
Yes.
I was there. when you had the home run chase and setting aside the steroids era. It
Yeah.
was so fun. And so at that game, when McGuire broke the record and doing it with the Cubs, and Sosa coming in from the outfield to congratulate him, and anyway, that was just an exceptional moment to be
Monumental
present
life
for it.
event right there.
Yeah. So and my wife wasn't too interested in hanging in her house. So
Perfect, Levi. Hey, it's been great. Let's reconnect, man. I love this conversation. I think we can go a lot further with this, a lot deeper with this. So we'll reconnect soon. Appreciate you taking time, buddy.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you for your time, and look forward to picking up the conversation again in the future.
This is the Building the Future podcast. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe. Please like and share. You can find out more at our website, www.buildingthefuturepodcast.com. Together we are building the future.